Do you know what it feels like when the very people you nurtured, fed, and gave your whole life for begin plotting behind your back? It's a bitterness you cannot quite describe, one that gnaws at your chest in the dead of night, keeping your old bones restless. My dears, let me tell you something. People don't always come to steal your jewelry or your fine silverware. Sometimes they come to steal your very legacy. The story of your life written on paper, the truth you wanted to leave behind. And in my case, they tried to burn it. Yes, burn my will, as if by setting fire to paper, they could erase me. But what they didn't know, and what will make you smile once you hear the whole tale, is that I had a copy, a secret copy, a copy that changed everything. But I mustn't rush. You need to see it through my eyes, as it truly happened, so you can feel the betrayal as I did. The house. The house must come first. My old English home, standing on the outskirts of Hampshire, hidden behind tall iron gates and framed by weeping willows that brush their long green fingers against the gravel drive. That house has stood for centuries. The stones remember, the wood remembers, and the walls whisper if you listen closely enough. Its tall windows stretch like solemn eyes, staring down at visitors, daring them to step inside. And once you are inside, you never quite forget it. To most, it was only a house. But to me, it was everything. The place where I raised my children. The place where I kissed my husband for the last time before lowering him into the earth. The place where I grew older with every passing winter, and yet still felt the presence of those who came before me. A house like that is more than walls. It is a soul. I had written my will at the heavy oak desk in the study, sitting for hours by candlelight, my hands trembling, but my heart certain. I wanted fairness. I wanted legacy. I wanted each child to have something of me when I was gone. But, greed has a way of twisting fairness into insult, of turning love into rivalry. After my husband's death, their eyes began to shift. At first, I thought it was grief. They were all grieving in their ways. But grief fades, and what remained was hunger. Not for comfort, not for family, not for the warm smell of Sunday roast. No, their hunger was for the house, the land, the accounts I had saved. They began to argue over small things. Who would inherit the old grandfather clock that had ticked away in the hallway for generations? Who would take the silver tea set my mother had polished until her fingers bled? Who would have the portraits, the pearls, the fields beyond the orchard? At first, I laughed it off. You'll all have your share, I told them. There is no need to fight, but my words were feathers in a storm, useless, weightless, carried away by their ambition. And then they began to circle the study. Do you know the way vultures circle the sky before a kill? That was how they lingered near my desk, how their eyes darted toward the drawers. They thought I didn't notice. But my dears, old eyes may dim, yet old instincts sharpen like knives. I saw everything, and I prepared for everything. I hid the real will in the unlikeliest of places. Not in the desk, not in the safe, not even in the attic where old trunks gathered dust. No, I tucked it away where no greedy hand would think to look. It was sealed, notarized, untouchable. What I left in my desk was only a draft, a decoy, bait for their arrogance. And still, the betrayal stung when it happened. It was a bitter winter's night, the kind where the wind whistles through the keyholes and rattles the shutters like a warning. I sat in my armchair by the fire, a blanket over my knees, my husband's photograph resting on the mantel above me. Outside, the trees groaned in the storm. Inside, the house seemed to hold its breath. Then I heard it. The soft creak of floorboards upstairs. Slow, cautious, almost careful enough to fool me. Almost. My children were supposed to have gone home after dinner, but I knew footsteps. You never forget the footsteps of your own flesh and blood. I stayed still, my breath shallow, my ears straining. The study door creaked open. Papers shuffled. And then My heart clenched. The strike of a match. The faint hiss of fire. The scent of smoke snaking through the air. They had found it. Or so they believed. I didn't move. I didn't dare. From the hallway, the faint orange glow seeped beneath the study door. I could hear them laughing softly, muffled voices as if they were conspirators in some wicked play. "It's done," one of them whispered. "She'll never know. It's gone." The sound of paper burning. It's a cruel, merciless sound. It hisses. It crackles. It spits, as if mocking the ink that once held words of truth. I closed my eyes and clenched the blanket in my fists. My heart ached. Not for the draft they destroyed. No, that was part of the plan. But for them. For my children, who had fallen so far into greed that they would commit such an act. I should have stormed in. I should have thrown open the door and screamed until my voice shook the very walls. But I didn't. I stayed silent, because silence can be the sharpest knife. When they finally left, footsteps triumphant down the stairs, I stayed in my chair until the house was quiet again. Only the fire crackled, warm and mocking. My eyes burned with tears, but my lips curled into the faintest smile. They thought they had erased me, but my dears, I had written myself into permanence. The true will was safe, and their betrayal had already sown the seeds of their downfall. The next morning, they returned, all polite smiles and empty voices. "Good morning, Mother," they said, as though they hadn't been thieves in the night. I served them tea. I even poured the milk myself, steady though my hand shook with anger. They searched my eyes for a sign, any sign, that I knew. But I gave them nothing. Oh, how it must have stung, drinking tea from the very hands of the woman they believed they had silenced. Do you feel the chill creeping up your spine as I tell you this? Then lean closer, my dear listener, because this is only the beginning. The story of how my own children tried to rob me of my last word, and how I turned the tables on them, will haunt you long after you finish listening. And if you want to keep walking this haunted corridor with me, if you want to know every twist of this tale, then I beg you, subscribe, like, share this with someone you trust. Because one day, this could happen to you. One day, the hands you fed could turn to thieves. I didn't sleep that night, not truly. The image of flames devouring the draft haunted me. But beneath the sorrow was a fire of my own, a determination brighter than any candle. They thought the war was over, but the war had only just begun. And so, I smiled at them across the breakfast table, my lips sealed, my secret burning brighter than their betrayal. I let them think they had won. I let them bask in their false victory. Because soon, sooner than they could imagine, the truth would come out. And when it did, their faces would pale, their voices would tremble, and their greed would be exposed for the world to see. If you are still with me, listening to every word, I thank you. You are keeping me alive, even as my children tried to erase me. And for that, my dear, I will tell you more, but not yet. For what happened next was darker, more twisted than even I could have imagined. The strangest thing about betrayal, my dear, is not the act itself. It is the silence that follows it. A silence that sits heavy in the air, clings to the curtains, lingers on every doorknob and stair. After that night, after the hiss and crackle of my draft wheel turning to ash, the house itself seemed to grow colder. Even in the morning light, with birds chirping in the garden, I could feel it, an unease, as if the walls were ashamed of the secrets they had been forced to witness. I knew my children thought the matter was finished. Their faces gave them away. They smiled more easily, their voices lighter. My eldest son even kissed my cheek that morning, though he hadn't done so in months, perhaps years. My daughter offered to help with the washing up, her hands delicate around the porcelain teacups. And the youngest, oh, he looked at me with such false innocence, it nearly made me laugh aloud. They thought me blind. They thought me deaf. They thought me powerless. But I, who had lived through war, through loss, through nights of hunger and mornings of grief, was not so easily broken. No, my dears, I had lived too long to be fooled by a bit of smoke and ash. Still, their performance amused me. I let them chatter about the weather, about a neighbor's new motor car, about the latest gossip in town. I listened politely, nodding here, smiling there. All the while, the truth sat heavy in my chest, like a stone. I had not told them that the real will, the only one that mattered, was hidden in a place they would never think to look. A place only I could reach. A place where paper and ink were safer than they had ever been in the oak desk they so desperately searched. Do you want to know where I hid it, my dear listener? But if I tell you now, you'll miss the joy of the reveal later, when their faces turned white as snow. Be patient with me. Good stories are like old houses. They creak, they wander, they lead you down corridors before opening into the room you've been waiting for. That day, I kept to my routine. I tended the garden, trimming the roses, until my gloves were dotted with thorns. I baked bread in the old iron oven, its smell filling the kitchen with warmth. I fed the sparrows at the window, their wings fluttering like tiny prayers. But beneath the surface, my mind spun like the cogs of the grandfather clock in the hallway. I was planning, observing, calculating. Every glance they gave each other, every hushed whisper in the corners of the house, I caught it. They thought they were safe now, that the house and everything within it was theirs for the taking. They didn't realize I was 2 steps ahead, always 2 steps ahead. That night, when the house was once again quiet, I rose from my chair and walked through the darkened halls. With only a candle to light my way, the shadows stretched tall across the wallpaper, and the floorboards groaned beneath my slippers. I paused at the study door. The faint smell of burnt paper still lingered there, bitter and accusing. On the desk, the remains of the draft lay in a brass tray, blackened scraps, twisted at the edges, nothing more than ghosts of words. They had been thorough, my children, but not thorough enough. I touched the ashes with trembling fingers. They crumbled like dust against my skin, staining my hand black. For a moment, I felt sorrow. This was, after all, the handwriting of my own heart, words I had poured out late at night with tears stinging my eyes. Even if it was only a draft, even if it was bait for their greed, it had once been part of me, and to see it burned by their hands. The wound was deep. But then, I smiled, because ashes tell stories too, don't they? They tell of fire, of destruction, and they tell of mistakes. For in their arrogance, my children thought they had silenced me. They thought they had won. They didn't realize they had only confirmed what I had long suspected, that they were willing to do anything, even commit such treachery, to take what was not yet theirs. And that knowledge, my dears, was power. As I left the study, the house seemed to sigh around me, as though it too was relieved I still carried the truth. The grandfather clock struck midnight, each chime echoing down the halls like a warning. I whispered to the house then, as I often did in my loneliest hours, "Don't worry. They won't win. Not while I still breathe." The days that followed were a curious sort of theatre. They visited me more often, each child taking turns to appear kind, dutiful, caring. My eldest brought flowers, though I noticed he left the price tag on, as if the cost would impress me. My daughter baked a cake, her smile brittle as porcelain, her eyes darting always to the study door. And the youngest, he read me the newspaper, stumbling over the words as if he were still a boy at school. They thought their play acting was convincing, but I watched them the way a hawk watches mice, and I could see the truth scuttling beneath their masks. And yet, I played my own part. I praised the flowers. I ate the cake. I clapped my hands at the newspaper stories. I let them believe their charade, because in pretending, I learned more than I ever could through confrontation. I learned which one gave the orders, which one hesitated, which one feared being caught, And most importantly, I learned that their greed was not just for the house. It was for control. They wanted to erase me, to silence me before I was even gone. One evening, as the sun bled red across the horizon, my eldest son lingered after the others had gone. He stood by the mantelpiece, fiddling with his cufflinks, his eyes darting to mine and then away again. Finally he said, "Mother, you're not getting any younger. Perhaps it's time you stopped worrying about papers and legacies. We'll take care of things. You can trust us." Trust. Oh, what a dangerous word on the lips of liars. I looked at him then, long and steady, until he shifted on his feet, like a schoolboy caught in a lie. "Of course," I said softly, stirring my tea. "I trust you." He smiled, but it never reached his eyes. Do you see now, my dear listener, how deceit works? It doesn't come crashing like thunder. No, it creeps like ivy, wrapping itself around everything until you can no longer tell the truth from the lie. And if my story has you leaning closer, if your heart beats a little faster with each word, then I beg you, don't just listen. Subscribe, share this tale. Let others know that greed wears many faces, sometimes even the face of your own blood. That night, as I lay in bed, the storm returned. Rain lashed against the windows, and the trees groaned like old men in pain. I turned on my side, staring at the wardrobe across the room, my mind restless. For though I had the true will safe, though my children believed they had triumphed, I knew the game had only begun. Their greed would not stop at one burned draft. They would keep searching, keep scheming, keep pressing until they thought they had secured everything. And I, in turn, would have to be sharper, faster, stronger. The candle on my bedside table flickered. The shadows twisted across the walls, and for a moment, I thought I saw him, my husband, standing in the corner, his eyes solemn, his mouth set in that stern line I knew so well. A trick of the light, perhaps. Or perhaps not. Perhaps even he was watching, waiting to see how I would protect the life we had built together. I whispered into the dark, "Don't worry, love. I've hidden it well. They won't find it. They'll never find it." And with that, I closed my eyes. Not in peace, no, but in determination, because I knew the coming days would test me more than ever before. And I was ready. But oh, my dears, I had no idea just how far my children were willing to go. Do you know what it is to sit at your own table, surrounded by your own flesh and blood, and feel like a stranger? That, my dear, is the cruelest kind of loneliness. It isn't the silence of empty rooms that breaks a heart. No, it's the noise of voices that once called you mother with love, now sharp with calculation, dripping with false sweetness. The days after they burned my draft were a theater of lies. They came often, my children, more often than before. At first, I thought perhaps it was guilt, tugging at their hearts like a loose thread. But no, it wasn't guilt, it was greed, dressed in politeness. They lingered in the kitchen, fussed over my health, asked what errands I needed done, and always, their eyes wandered to the cupboards, to the drawers, to the very walls of the house, as though measuring which part of it would be theirs. My eldest son, James, sturdy, broad, his voice as deep as his father's once was, always pretended authority. He stood in the corners with his hands behind his back, surveying the house as if he already owned it. My daughter, Margaret, so delicate and soft-spoken, played her part well. She would kiss my cheek and say, "Don't you worry, mother. We only want what's best for you." Her words were honey, but her eyes betrayed her. And my youngest, Thomas, oh, he was the cleverest of them all. He hid behind innocence, behind that sweet smile he'd carried since childhood. But I could see the calculation turning behind his eyes. They were a trio of masks, each one polished to deceive. But I had lived longer than all of them combined, hadn't I? For every mask they wore, I had seen 10 before. For every trick they thought clever, I already knew the ending. I may have been old, but I was not blind. One afternoon, as we sat at tea, James cleared his throat. "Mother," he began, his voice careful, as though rehearsed, "we've been thinking. This house, it's too much for you now. Don't you think you'd be more comfortable in a smaller place? Perhaps a cottage by the sea. We could take care of things here, manage the land, ensure it's maintained properly." Ah, such noble words, don't you think? To the untrained ear, it might sound like concern. But to me, it was a wolf baring its teeth beneath a sheep's wool. I smiled at him, my spoon clinking softly against the china. A cottage by the sea. Oh, how lovely! But tell me, James, would you visit me there? Or would I die staring at the waves, waiting for children who never come? He froze. Margaret hurried to speak, her hand resting gently on mine. "Of course we would visit, Mother. We only want you to be safe, to be happy." I looked at her hand on mine, soft, smooth, ringed with gold, and remembered the nights I stayed awake by her cradle, soothing her cries with songs. And now here she was, singing me to my grave with false promises. "I am safe here," I said simply. "Safer than anywhere else in the world." Thomas chuckled then, too lightly, the sound brittle in the quiet room. "Safe from what, Mother? You sound as though you think someone's after you." My eyes met his, sharp as daggers. Should I? The silence that followed was thick as soup. They shifted in their chairs, glancing at each other, their masks slipping for just a heartbeat. And in that moment, I knew they feared me, not because of strength, not because of power, but because deep down, they wondered if I knew more than I let on. And they were right. That night, after they left, I moved through the house with my candle once again. The shadows clung to the wallpaper, stretching long like fingers reaching for me. I paused at the grandfather clock, its steady ticking like the heartbeat of the house, and I whispered to it, as I always did, "Don't worry. They won't find it. Not here. Not ever." The truth was hidden in the most ordinary of places, my dears. But it was ordinary only to me. To them, it was invisible. I had chosen the spot carefully, years before, knowing my children's eyes would never linger there, knowing their greed would make them overlook it. The true will slept in silence, sealed tight, waiting for the day it would rise like a ghost from the grave and strike them down with its truth. But here is where the story twists, where the house itself began to take sides. Strange things began to happen after that night. At first, I thought it was my imagination, the fancies of an old woman with too much time alone. But then, no, it was real. I would hear footsteps in the halls when I was the only one home. Doors would creak open as though pushed by unseen hands. And sometimes, when I passed the study, I could swear I smelled smoke. Faint, bitter, lingering, as though the fire of that burn draft had left a scar on the air itself. I told myself it was the house settling, the memory of old wood and stone. But in my heart, I wondered, was it my husband, restless in the beyond? Was he warning me, guiding me, telling me that the battle was not yet over? One evening, as I sat by the fire, Margaret arrived unannounced. She slipped inside like a shadow, her eyes darting around the room. "Mother," she whispered, "I must speak with you privately." I gestured for her to sit, though suspicion coiled in my stomach. She leaned close, her voice low. "It was James. He pushed us. He said we had to burn the will. He said it was the only way to protect the families. I didn't want to do it, Mother. Truly I didn't. But he made us. He said you were losing your mind, that you'd written something unfair. I swear, I never meant to hurt you." Her eyes glistened with tears, her voice trembling with rehearsed regret. Oh, she was good. Very good. But she forgot one thing. Mothers can tell the difference between real tears and false ones. I reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "Oh, Margaret," I said, my voice soft. "You poor thing. Always following, never leading. Did you think I wouldn't know?" Her face froze. The tears vanished as quickly as they had come, and in that frozen silence, I saw the truth. She wasn't confessing out of guilt. She was testing me. She wanted to see how much I knew, whether I had guessed the truth, whether I still held the power. I smiled at her then, the kind of smile that hides more than it reveals. Don't worry, my dear, all is forgiven, and oh, the relief in her eyes. But little did she know, forgiveness was the last thing I intended. Because you see, my listener, every word they spoke, every lie they told, every performance they staged, it only tightened the noose around their own necks. And when the time came, when the truth was finally revealed, that noose would pull tight. If your heart is racing now, if you're gripping your seat, wondering how much darker this tale can grow, then don't forget to subscribe, like and share. Because trust me, this story is only just beginning, and you won't want to miss the twists that are yet to come. That night, when Margaret left, I sat in the dim glow of the fire, staring at the portrait of my husband above the mantel. His eyes seemed to follow me, stern and knowing, and I whispered to him, "They think they've beaten me, love, but the real battle is yet to come, and when it does, they will regret ever underestimating me." The flames crackled in the hearth, and I could almost hear his voice in the flicker. "Do not yield, do not forget," and I did not. Do you know what it feels like to walk through your own home and sense that the walls are listening, that the beams creak not from age, but from the weight of secrets? That is what my house became in those weeks, alive, watchful, an accomplice to my silence. After Margaret's little performance, I knew things would escalate, and oh how they did. James arrived the very next day. No softness, no pretense, no masks. He stormed into the study like a general, into enemy territory, his boots heavy on the floorboards. His face was flushed, his jaw tight, his eyes full of fire. "Mother," he barked, not even bothering to greet me. "This foolishness has gone on long enough. We know you wrote another will. We know you've hidden it somewhere in this house. Tell us where it is, and we can end this game before it goes too far." Ah, my dear, the arrogance of sons who believe themselves wiser than their mothers. I sat calmly in my chair by the window, the lace curtains glowing in the pale light, my knitting resting in my lap. I looked up at him and smiled. "Another will? Oh, James, what a vivid imagination you've always had." His hand slammed down on the desk, rattling the inkwell and scattering papers to the floor. "Don't mock me, Mother. Do you think I don't see it? Do you think I don't know? We searched this house from top to bottom, and still, we found nothing. That means it must be here, hidden in some clever place. Where is it?" His voice shook with desperation, not authority, and desperation is a dangerous thing. I leaned forward, lowering my voice as though whispering a secret. "James, my son, what if I told you the house knows? What if I told you it keeps my secrets better than you ever could?" He froze, his brow furrowing. "What are you talking about?" I chuckled softly. "Listen closely at night, James. The walls speak. The floors remember. The house decides who it belongs to." For a moment, just a flicker, fear crossed his face. Then anger buried it again. He turned, muttering, and left the room, slamming the door so hard the portraits shook on the walls. That was the beginning of the unraveling. Not long after, Thomas revealed his true colors. My sweet-faced boy, my charming child. He was the darkest of them all. While James used force and Margaret used lies, Thomas used cunning. He came to me in the evening with a glass of sherry in his hand, smiling that same innocent smile he had since he was a boy. "Mother," he said softly, sitting opposite me, "I worry about you. Truly I do. James is so rough. Margaret's so emotional. But me, I only want to protect you." He handed me the sherry, urging me to drink. Ah, but I knew better. I raised the glass, sniffed it lightly, and set it down untouched. His smile faltered. You think I don't know what you've done? I whispered, my voice cutting through the silence. You think I don't see the poison in your hands, the lies in your smile, but a mother always knows. His face hardened then, the mask slipping away entirely. He leaned forward, his voice low and venomous. Then you should also know this. Time is running out. We will find the will, whether you help us or not. And when we do, you'll regret not standing with us. He rose and left, his footsteps echoing down the hallway, like the drumbeats of war. And so, the house grew tense, thick with the weight of suspicion and hatred. They prowled its rooms like predators, opening drawers, pulling at shelves, tapping the walls for hollow spaces. Sometimes I would wake in the middle of the night to the sound of their searching, their whispers slithering through the corridors like snakes. But they never found it, because you see, the hiding place was not clever in the way they thought. It wasn't in a safe, or behind a painting, or under the floorboards. No, it was in plain sight, disguised by ordinariness. A place so humble, so overlooked, that none of their greedy eyes would ever settle there long enough to question it. Do you want to know where, my dear listener? But I cannot tell you yet. Patience. All in good time. One stormy night, the truth began to surface. The house shuddered beneath the wind, its windows rattling, its chimneys moaning like lost souls. The children gathered in the dining room, arguing in hushed voices, their words sharp as knives. I sat at the head of the table, silent, watching them devour one another. It must be in the study, James growled. We've overlooked something. No, Margaret hissed. She wouldn't put it there. It's too obvious, Thomas smirked, sipping his wine. You're both fools. It isn't in the house at all. She's given it to someone else, someone we don't know. They turned on each other then, suspicion splintering their fragile alliance. Their voices rose, their masks fell, and for the first time, they saw themselves for what they were. Not siblings, not family, but rivals. Wolves snapping at one another over a carcass. I tapped my spoon against my glass, the sound sharp and ringing. They froze, their eyes snapping to me. My children, I said, my voice steady and cold. You search and scheme and tear at one another like beasts. But you forget one thing. This house does not belong to you. Not yet, and perhaps not ever. The silence was deafening. Then James, his face crimson with fury, leaned across the table. Then tell us, Mother, where is it? Where is the will? I leaned back in my chair, folding my hands in my lap. Do you want to know the truth? It is where you would never bow low enough to look. It is where humility dwells, and greed does not. Their faces twisted in confusion, anger, fear. But they did not understand. Of course they didn't. They had never understood humility. That night, after they finally left, the house seemed to sigh in relief. The storm outside raged on, but within, there was a strange calm, as though the walls themselves knew the end was near. I rose from my chair, took my candle, and made my way to the place where the will slept. The floor creaked beneath my steps. The shadows swayed on the walls, the air thick with anticipation, and there it was, still safe, still hidden, still waiting. I knelt, my old bones groaning, and rested my hand upon it. Not yet, I whispered, but soon. Oh, my dear listener, do you feel it? The tension, the breath before the storm breaks. That is where we are now. The battle lines are drawn, the masks torn away, the house alive with secrets. And when the truth finally comes to light, it will not be me who is destroyed. No, it will be them. So if you're still with me, if your heart is pounding and your breath is caught, then don't forget, like, share, and subscribe. Because what comes next will leave you gasping. And perhaps, when the truth is finally revealed, you will understand why I chose to tell you this story at all. Do you know what it feels like to be hunted inside your own home? To wake in the middle of the night and hear the sound of drawers being pulled open, Doors creaking, whispers snaking through corridors. Like shadows of betrayal. That became my reality. My own flesh and blood turned my house into a battlefield. Each step they took, echoing with greed. One night, I lay awake in my bed. The candle burned down to a stub. When I heard them, soft footsteps, not one pair, but two. They moved along the corridor, stopping outside my door. I could hear their breathing, shallow, deliberate. Then a whisper, Thomas's voice, low and dangerous. She's old, James. She sleeps heavily. We could go in now, search her room, and she wouldn't even know. My heart thumped in my chest, but I did not move. I let the silence answer for me. I wanted to hear what they would do, James muttered back. And if she wakes, you know what she's like. She'll tell everyone. She'll twist it. No, we wait. Tomorrow, when she goes for her walk in the garden, we'll tear this place apart. And then, soft laughter. Cruel laughter. My sons, laughing outside my bedroom, like jackals waiting for an old lioness to falter. But I did not falter. At dawn, I rose, dressed slowly, and left my door wide open as I passed into the hallway. Their eyes followed me. I knew it. I walked with dignity, each step a declaration. This is still my house, not yours. By the time I returned from my walk, the storm had already passed through the rooms. Drawers emptied, cupboards flung open, carpets pulled back, even the mattress in the guest room overturned. They searched everywhere except where the will truly was. I watched them from the doorway, their faces flushed, their hands filthy with dust. James cursed, kicking at the broken leg of a chair. Thomas's hair was plastered to his forehead with sweat. Margaret sat slumped against the wall, her eyes wide, her hands trembling. You fools, she hissed. You're making it worse. If she sees what we've done, she knows already, James shouted, turning on her with wild eyes. She's playing us, don't you see? She's enjoying this. Ah, how right he was. I was enjoying it. Not their malice, but their blindness. They could rip the house apart stone by stone, and still they would not see. I cleared my throat, and 3 heads snapped towards me, like wolves caught in the light. Are you looking for something? I asked, my voice steady, my hands folded neatly in front of me. Not one of them spoke. The silence thickened until it was almost unbearable. Then Thomas, ever the serpent, forced a smile. Mother, we were just tidying. This old house has so many corners, don't you think? Indeed, I replied softly. Corners where dust gathers, and secrets sleep. Their faces flickered with unease. Oh, how fear had begun to creep in, mingling with greed. It pleased me more than I can say. That evening, I sat once more in the study, the fire crackling, casting shadows that stretched long and thin along the walls. The house was restless. I could feel it in my bones. The portraits seemed to watch. The floorboards groaned beneath unseen steps. The wind whispered against the glass. I whispered too, into the crackling fire. Protect me. Protect the truth. And I swear, the flames answered. The next day, they tried something bolder. Margaret came to me in tears, falling to her knees beside my chair. Oh, Mother, she sobbed, clutching at my skirt. Please forgive us. We've been so foolish. We've been so cruel. But you know I love you. You know I only want what's best. If you truly have another will, just let me see it. Just me. I promise I'll protect it. I'll protect you. Her tears wet the fabric of my dress. But do you know what I saw in her eyes, even as they glistened? Hunger. Not love, not remorse, but hunger. I cupped her cheek, stroking it gently like I did when she was a child. Oh, my sweet girl, I whispered. If you love me, then you will trust me. And if you cannot trust me, then perhaps you never loved me at all. She pulled back as though slapped, her face twisting with rage. You're cruel, Mother, cruel! She stormed out, her sobs echoing down the hall. but I knew the sobs were hollow. The days grew darker then, the air in the house heavy with tension. I could no longer walk freely without feeling their eyes drilling into me, their whispers darting behind my back. They moved like conspirators, and I moved like prey. But prey can have teeth. One night I laid a little trap. I left a drawer in the study ajar, a corner of paper peeking out as though by accident. Then I sat in the shadows, silent as the grave, and I waited. It did not take long. Thomas crept in first, candle in hand, his shadow stretching grotesquely against the wall. He moved straight to the drawer, his greedy hands trembling as he pulled it open. And then James appeared behind him, grabbing his arm. "Found it, did you?" James hissed. Thomas snarled, shoving him back. "It's mine. I saw it first." They fought. My sons. Once so sweet, now brawling like animals in the flickering light of the candle. The drawer clattered to the floor, papers scattering everywhere. Their fists connected. Their voices roared. I stepped from the shadows then, my voice cutting through the chaos. "Enough!" They froze, their chests heaving, their faces red, their hands clutching at one another's throats. The candle guttered, casting them in monstrous light. "You shame yourselves," I said, my voice trembling with fury. "This house, this family, this name, you drag it through the mud with your greed. Do you think a fortune will heal the rot inside you? Do you think money can buy back what you've already lost?" Their silence was louder than their fight. For the first time, I saw shame flicker in their eyes, but only for a moment. Then James spat on the floor, his jaw set. "You'll regret this, Mother. One way or another, you'll regret this." And he stormed out, dragging Thomas with him. I sank into my chair, my body trembling, my heart pounding. But inside, deep inside, there was a fire. They thought they could scare me, break me, force me. But they had no idea how strong I was, how strong the truth was. Because the truth was waiting. The truth was hidden. The truth was alive. And soon, my dear listener, very soon, it would come to light. So if you've stayed with me this far, if you can feel the storm gathering as I do, then don't forget, subscribe, like, and share. Because the next twist will leave you breathless. The air in the house grew poisonous after that night. You could almost taste it. Like iron, like smoke. Like something burning just beyond the walls. My children, once bound by blood, now bound only by greed, moved like shadows through the rooms. Whispering, plotting, scheming. And I moved like a ghost. Silent, watchful, untouchable. But ghosts, you see, are feared for a reason. One evening, as the last light of the sun bled red across the curtains, Margaret came again. This time not with tears, not with pleading, but with fury in her eyes and venom in her voice. "I've had enough of your games, Mother," she snapped, standing tall in the doorway. "You think this is amusing? Watching us suffer. Watching us claw at each other like animals." I folded my hands in my lap, my voice calm. "I do not make you animals, Margaret. You do that yourselves." Her face twisted, and for a moment I saw not my daughter, but a stranger. "If you would only hand it over, everything would be settled. We could stop this madness. Don't you see? You're the one causing this." I looked her square in the eye. "No, child. Greed causes this, and greed is a fire that consumes until there is nothing left but ash." She trembled with rage, and then she spat words that cut me deeper than any knife. "Then perhaps it's time that fire swallowed you too." And she left me in the dark. That night, I did not sleep. I sat in my chair by the fire, listening. The house groaned. The wind whispered. The trees outside clawed at the glass with skeletal fingers. Midnight passed, and still I listened. And then it came. The faintest scent of smoke. At first I thought it the fire in the hearth. But no, the hearth had long gone cold. I rose, heart pounding, and stepped into the hallway. The smell was stronger there. Acrid. Bitter. And then I saw it, the faint glow beneath the study door. I hurried forward, pushing it open, and there they were, my children, my own blood, crouched by the fire, papers in their hands. They were burning them, my old letters, my journals, anything they thought might hide the will. The flames devoured my life piece by piece, licking greedily at the edges. James turned, his face wild in the firelight. "Stay back, Mother. This doesn't concern you. It concerns everything," I cried, my voice trembling with fury. "And those are my memories, my words, my very soul. And you burn them like rubbish." Thomas sneered, tossing another bundle into the fire. "If the will's here, it'll burn with the rest. Better ash than in someone else's hands." And Margaret, oh Margaret, she stood silently, her eyes cold, her lips pressed tight. She did not throw anything in, but she did not stop them either. She watched. And that, perhaps, was worse. I staggered forward, but James shoved me back, his grip iron on my frail arm. "Enough, Mother. If you won't tell us where it is, then we'll burn every last piece of this house until we find it." The fire roared, the smoke thickened, the papers curled into nothingness. My heart clenched. Not for the will. It was safe. Oh yes, it was safe. But for the cruelty I saw in their faces. "Stop," I screamed, my voice breaking. "Stop, before you damn yourselves completely." But they did not stop. At last, when the flames had devoured enough to choke the room, they stepped back, coughing, their eyes watering. The study was filled with smoke, the smell of burnt paper clinging to every surface. James wiped his brow, his voice hoarse. "If it was there, it's gone now. If not, then perhaps it never existed." He left then, dragging Thomas with him, their laughter echoing hollow down the corridor. Margaret lingered a moment, her face pale, her eyes meeting mine. For a flicker, just a flicker, I thought I saw regret. But then she turned and followed them, leaving me alone in the smoke. I sank into the chair by the hearth, my chest heaving, my eyes burning. They thought they had destroyed everything. They thought their fire had consumed the truth, but the truth does not burn. I whispered to the flames, to the ashes, to the shadows clinging to the corners of the room. They know nothing. They will never know. For the will sleeps where they will never bow low enough to look. The house groaned then, a deep, resonant sound, as though it too knew the secret, and I felt a strength rise within me, a strength born of fury, of love, of justice. They had tried to break me, to burn me, but they had only sharpened my resolve. The next day, I made my move. I summoned them to the drawing room, all three of them, their faces still shadowed with the smoke of the night before. They stood before me, tense, restless, their eyes darting, their hands twitching. "I have watched you tear this house apart," I began, my voice firm, my spine straight. "I have watched you fight, lie, cheat, and burn. And for what? For scraps? For shadows? You think yourselves clever hunters, but you are blind. Blind to the truth. Blind to the will. Blind to me." James scoffed, but I silenced him with a glare. "Listen well, for this is the last warning I will give. The will exists. It is here, and one day soon it will come to light. But hear me now, it will not belong to you, not because of your blood, nor your name, nor your schemes. It will belong to the one who shows humility, to the one who bows low enough to see what you never could." Their faces twisted with confusion, fury, fear. Margaret's lips trembled, as though she wanted to speak but could not. Thomas clenched his fists. James's jaw tightened until the vein in his temple pulsed. "You play riddles with us," James growled. "But riddles won't save you." "No," I replied softly. "But the truth will." And with that, I rose and left them, my heart pounding but steady, because I had given them the first true clue. Do you see it, my dear listener? Do you hear the riddle hidden in my words? It is where you would never bow low enough to look. Yes, That is where the will sleeps. And if you've followed me this far, if you feel the fire of my words burning in your chest, then I ask you, don't forget to like, to share, to subscribe. For the next chapter will tear the veil completely from their faces. And then, at last, the secret will begin to breathe. The house had always been my sanctuary, but by then, it had turned into something else, something darker. The wallpaper seemed to watch me, the floorboards carried whispers, and every mirror reflected not only my face, but the secrets that clung to me like a second skin. I had lived here for decades, every corner familiar, every stair creak known to me. But now, with my children prowling, it felt like a battlefield. James grew more reckless with each passing day. His voice thundered through the halls, rattling the chandeliers, breaking the fragile silence. Margaret's eyes darkened, her tears replaced by a cold, cutting resolve. And Thomas, he smiled more than ever, but the smile no longer reached his eyes. It was the smile of a man who had made peace with betrayal. They had searched, they had burned, and yet they still found nothing. My words haunted them, my riddle. It is where you would never bow low enough to look. I could see it gnaw at them, keeping them awake, driving them to madness. They whispered it to themselves, as though repetition would bring revelation. But greed blinds the mind, my dear, and their pride was their curse. One evening I sat in the drawing room, the fire crackling, when James burst in, his fists clenched, his face scarlet. He slammed the door so hard the glass rattled in its panes. "Enough," he roared. "Enough of your riddles, your tricks, your games. We're done waiting. If you don't tell us where it is, we'll make you tell us." I sat still, my knitting needles clicking calmly. "And how, James, do you plan to make me?" He stepped forward, looming over me, his breath hot with wine and rage. For a moment, I thought he would strike me. His hand twitched, his knuckles white. But then he caught himself, exhaled sharply, and instead grabbed the chair by my side, flinging it across the room. It shattered against the wall, splinters flying. "Do you see?" he shouted. "Do you see what you've done to us?" "Yes," I whispered, my eyes never leaving his. "I see exactly what you've become." That silenced him, if only for a moment. But Thomas stepped in then, his smile sharp as a knife. "Brother, leave her. She'll never speak willingly. But there are ways to loosen a tongue, gentle ways, and less gentle ones." My heart thudded. My sons, my own blood, speaking of torment as though it were a tool in their hands. For a flicker of a moment, I feared them, truly feared them. But fear can be a weapon too. "Do it then," I said softly. "Do what you think you must. But know this, if you harm me, the truth dies with me, and you will be left with nothing but ashes in your hands." They froze, the truth sinking into their thick skulls. For all their cruelty, they were not fools. They knew the risk. James spat on the floor, muttering, and stormed out. Thomas lingered, his smile never fading, but his eyes flickering with unease. Then he, too, left me alone with the fire, and Margaret. Margaret came later. Quiet as a shadow, she slipped into the room after night had fallen. She knelt by my chair, her hands trembling, her voice low. "Mother," she whispered, "I can't do this anymore. They're mad. James, he frightens me. And Thomas, he's not the brother I knew. Please, I beg you, if you love me, tell me the truth. Tell me where it is, so I can end this madness before it consumes us all." I stroked her hair gently, my voice calm. "My sweet child, do you truly think you can end madness by feeding it? If I give you the truth, what will you do? Will you keep it safe, or will you hand it to your brothers and let them tear this house apart with it?" Her silence was answer enough. I lifted her chin so her eyes met mine. "Margaret, listen well. The will exists. It is safe. But it will never be theirs. It will never be yours. Not while greed drives your heart. The one who finds it, will be the one who bends low enough to see what you will not. The one who humbles themselves. Do you understand? Her tears fell then, hot on my hand. She kissed my knuckles, whispering, "I'm sorry, Mother. I'm so sorry." And she fled into the night, leaving me with a heart heavy and torn. The days passed in uneasy silence after that. The children grew restless, snapping at one another, their alliances fraying. The house itself seemed to resist them, the doors sticking, the stairs groaning beneath their weight, the very air thick with disapproval. It was as if the walls remembered who truly belonged, and who was trespassing. One afternoon, I watched from the window as the storm clouds gathered. Thunder rolled over the hills. Lightning flashed in the distance. The house darkened, the air heavy with the smell of rain. And I knew the storm outside was nothing compared to the storm brewing within. That night, it came to a head. I was in the library when I heard the shouting. James and Thomas again, their voices like clashing swords. I hurried to the hallway, my cane tapping, my heart pounding. "You've failed us!" James bellowed. "All your plans, all your cunning, and what do we have? Nothing!" Thomas snarled back, his face twisted with rage. "And you think your fists and shouting will get us further? You're a brute, James. Always have been. If not for me, we'd still be stumbling in the dark." Margaret's voice broke through then, shrill and desperate. "Stop it, both of you. Can't you see what you're doing?" But they did not stop. They lunged at each other, fists flying, crashing into the walls, knocking over vases, tearing at each other like rabid dogs. Margaret screamed, trying to pull them apart, but she was thrown aside like a rag doll. I stepped forward then, my voice rising with a power I did not know I still possessed. "Enough." They froze, panting, their faces red, their clothes torn. Their eyes snapped to me, and in that moment, I saw it, the truth. They were lost to greed, to hatred, to a darkness deeper than any storm. And I knew then what must be done. "My children," I said, my voice steady, despite the trembling in my bones. "You have shown me who you truly are. And now, the time is near. The will shall be revealed, but not to you. Not like this." Their faces twisted with rage and confusion. James stepped forward, his hand raised as though to strike me. Margaret gasped. Thomas sneered. But before his hand could fall, a thunderclap split the sky, shaking the house to its very foundations. The lights flickered, the air hummed, and the storm burst in full fury. And in that storm, I felt the house itself rise against them. The doors slammed, the windows rattled, the very floor seemed to shake. The children stumbled, their eyes wide with fear. "This house knows," I cried above the roar of thunder. "It remembers, it protects, and it will never bow to you." The storm raged, the children fled, and I was left alone in the trembling silence. And I whispered to the shadows, "Soon the truth will be known." So, my dear listener, if you are still with me, if your heart races with mine, then don't forget, like, share, subscribe, because the storm has only just begun, and the secret is closer than ever to breaking free. The storm did not relent that night. It hammered against the old English house with the fury of 1,000 fists, rattling the shutters, slamming branches against the roof. The rain poured in sheets, drenching the earth, making the garden outside look like a graveyard in mourning. But it wasn't the storm that kept me awake. It was the silence of my children. That silence was worse than the shouting. When James's voice was gone, when Thomas's schemes paused, when Margaret's sobbing quieted, the silence left behind was cold, sharp, and brimming with intent. I lay awake in my bed, the candle flickering on my bedside table, the shadows stretching across the walls like dark fingers. And I knew they were planning. I heard them long after midnight. Their whispers slithered beneath my door. I strained my ears. "She'll never give it willingly," James hissed. We must force her and risk her dying before we learn the truth. Thomas countered. No, she's old, frail, but cunning. We need her alive. We need her cornered. Margaret's voice quavered. Please don't hurt her. She's still our mother. She stopped being our mother the moment she chose her precious house over us. James spat. I closed my eyes, clutching the blanket. They would not let this go, and so, neither would I. The following day dawned grey, the storm still brooding but quieter, like a predator crouching, waiting for the next strike. I rose early, cane tapping the wooden floorboards, and walked through the halls. My house. My dear loyal house. It had protected me all these years, kept my secrets safe, and I whispered to it as I passed, "Hold fast, old friend. Just a little longer." The children were waiting for me in the dining room. 3 figures at the long oak table, faces stiff, eyes sharp. The smell of breakfast hung in the air, toast, eggs, and strong tea, but it tasted of nothing but bitterness. "Mother," Thomas said smoothly, his smile that same dangerous curve. "We've decided it's time to end this charade. You know what we want. You can give it to us now and save yourself trouble." I sat at the head of the table, my hands folded neatly before me. "A charade?" I murmured. "No, Thomas, this is no charade. This is truth. Truth you cannot bear to face." James slammed his fist on the table, rattling the silverware. "Enough riddles! Tell us where the will is. Or by God, I cut him off," my voice sharper than I intended. "You'll what, James? Strike me? Your own mother? Do it then. But remember, dead lips tell no secrets." He froze, his rage checked by my words, though the fire in his eyes did not die. Margaret reached for my hand then, her touch trembling. "Mother, please, I beg you. I can't live like this anymore. Just tell us, and let it end." I looked at her, my heart breaking. Of all of them, she was the one with a glimmer of softness left. But even she was lost in their net of greed. "My dear," I whispered, "it will end soon, but not in the way you think." They stared at me, confusion and fury mingling, and I rose, slowly, leaning on my cane, letting the silence weigh heavy between us. "Follow me," I said at last. Their eyes widened. At last, a hint of triumph gleamed in them. They scrambled to their feet, eager, greedy, like hounds catching scent of prey. I led them through the hallways, each step echoing in the silence. The house groaned as though it disapproved, the walls creaking, the stairs protesting. The storm had eased outside, but inside, tension thrummed like a taut wire. We reached the cellar door. It was old, heavy, its hinges rusted. I pulled it open with effort, the smell of damp earth and stone wafting up. Their breaths caught. They had searched the attic, the bedrooms, the study, the library. But the cellar? No, pride had kept them from bowing low enough to crawl into its depths. I looked at them then, my eyes sharp. The truth lies here, but beware, the truth is not always kind. James pushed past me, snatching a lantern from the wall. "Out of the way, Mother. We'll see for ourselves." Thomas followed, his grin widening, while Margaret lingered, her hand brushing my arm in silent fear. We descended. The air grew colder, heavier. The walls were damp, the stone slick. The lantern flickered, casting long shadows that danced like specters. The children searched feverishly, tearing at crates, pulling at shelves, knocking jars to the ground. The cellar filled with the sound of shattering glass, of wood breaking, of frantic desperation, but the will was not there. Not yet. I stood in the corner, my heart steady, watching them unravel. James turned on me then, sweat beading his forehead, his chest heaving. "Where is it? Tell us!" I lifted my chin. "Closer than you think," he roared, grabbing my arm, shaking me. Margaret cried out, trying to pull him back. Thomas laughed, the sound chilling. Don't you see, James? She's still playing us. Still the puppet master. Then let's end it, James snarled, his grip tightening. And that was when I spoke the words that silenced them all. It's not in this house. The cellar rang with the weight of my confession. Their eyes widened. Their mouths opened in disbelief. What? Thomas hissed. It's not here. I repeated, my voice calm, steady. You could burn every floorboard, tear down every wall, and you would never find it. Because I knew you would look here. I knew you would never look beyond these walls. James's face twisted with rage. Liar, you're lying! But Margaret's eyes. Oh, her eyes told a different story. She believed me. She always had a softer instinct. She stepped closer, her voice breaking. Then where is it, Mother? Where? I smiled, though my heart ached. Safe. In the hands of one who will never betray what is just. They shouted. They raged. But I gave them no more. Not that night. I turned and left them in the cellar, their fury echoing behind me, their shadows clawing at the lantern light. And as I climbed the stairs, the storm outside broke again, thunder roaring across the sky, as though it agreed with my silence. But you, dear listener, yes, you who sits with me in this flickering memory, you will hear what they did not. You will stay, won't you? Subscribe, share, and join me, for the truth is drawing nearer, and the will they tried to burn still waits in the shadows. And soon, very soon, it will rise to change everything. I did not sleep that night. I sat by the window in my old wooden chair, the one your grandfather once made for me, the one that had cradled my aching bones for years. The storm outside thrashed like an angry beast, its claws against the glass, its growls shaking the earth. Yet it was nothing compared to the storm inside my home, inside my blood. My children thought me beaten. They thought my words in the cellar were a diversion, a trick. But they did not understand. I had spoken the truth. The will was not in the house, not in the cellar, not in the attic, not between the pages of dusty books or behind secret panels. It had always been somewhere safer, somewhere they would never dare to look. And that thought gave me comfort. Even as their rage simmered in the walls around me, I heard James pacing the hall like a caged lion, his boots striking the floor with heavy thuds. I heard Margaret weeping softly behind her locked door, her sobs like broken bells. And Thomas was the worst of all. He was silent, too silent. When Thomas went quiet, it meant he was planning. And Thomas's plans were always poisoned. I closed my eyes, letting the candlelight warm my face, and whispered to myself, hold strong, just a little longer. The truth must be revealed in its time. By dawn the storm had eased, leaving the air damp and heavy, the earth glistening like wet stone. The garden outside was a ruin of broken branches and torn flowers, yet the house stood proud, unbroken, as it always had. When I descended to breakfast, the children were waiting. Not eating, not speaking, just waiting. 3 pairs of eyes turned to me as I entered. And for the first time, I felt the full weight of their hunger, not for food, but for power, for control. Thomas smiled first. Good morning, Mother. His voice was silk stretched over steel. You've kept us guessing long enough. We've talked, and we've decided. It ends today. Ends, I echoed, lowering myself into my chair. James slammed his fist against the table. Tell us where the will is, now. Or you'll what? I cut in sharply. Kill me, beat me. You think violence will give you what you crave. Foolish children. You cannot bludgeon the truth out of me. Margaret's hands trembled as she reached for her cup. Mother, please, she whispered. They'll do something terrible if you don't. Just tell us. Spare us all. I looked at her, at the tears in her eyes, and my heart broke anew. My darling girl, I would spare you if I could. But you must understand, the truth was never meant for hands such as theirs. Or yours. The air thickened. James growled like a cornered beast. Thomas's smile faltered for the briefest flicker of a second, and then, before any of them could speak, I rose from my chair. "Come," I said. "If it must be revealed, then let it be revealed. But know this, you may not like what you find." Their eyes widened. Hope flared. Greed sharpened. They scrambled after me as I walked down the hall, my cane tapping against the polished wood. My steps were steady, though inside my chest, my heart pounded like a war drum. I led them not to the cellar, nor the library, nor even the study. No, I led them to the sitting room, the room no one thought twice about, the one lined with books, its windows overlooking the garden. It was an ordinary room, ordinary to the point of invisibility, and that was why it was perfect. I stood before the fireplace, my hand resting on the mantel. The children gathered behind me, their breaths shallow, their eyes burning into my back. "Do you remember your father?" I asked suddenly, turning to face them. "Do you remember how he loved this house? How he built it not just with bricks and wood, but with dreams?" Their faces were blank, impatient, hungry. He knew one day greed might poison even our bloodline. He knew there would come a time when a choice must be made, not for riches, but for justice. And so he left me with a task, a safeguard, a way to protect what truly matters. Thomas scoffed. "Enough with the speeches, Mother. Where is it?" I looked at him then, long and hard, and I smiled, a sad, tired smile. "Closer than you think." I reached for the old brass poker beside the fireplace and slid it against the stone at the hearth's edge. There was a faint click, a sound so small it could have been missed by anyone without patient ears. The children gasped as the stone shifted, a hidden panel sliding open, revealing a narrow cavity within. James lunged forward, shoving me aside, his hands tearing at the space. He pulled free a small iron box, rusted but sturdy, its lock old but intact. His eyes gleamed. "At last," he whispered, clutching it to his chest. "At last." Margaret clasped her hands to her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. Thomas laughed, a low, wicked sound. "Well done, Mother. You've finally done what you should have long ago." But I only shook my head. "You fools. Do you truly think the truth would be so easy? Do you think I would place everything in the very heart of your greed?" James froze, his knuckles white on the iron box. "What do you mean?" I stepped closer, my eyes piercing his. "That box is empty." His face twisted with rage. He wrenched the lid open, the lock snapping easily with his brute strength. And there it was, nothing, just cold hollow metal. "No," he roared, hurling the box across the room. It clanged against the wall and fell to the floor. Useless. Thomas's smile faltered, then died. Margaret collapsed into the chair, sobbing. "You see," I said softly, "the will you burned was not the true one. But neither was this. The truth lies elsewhere, far from this house, far from your grasp. Did you not listen? It is where you would never bow low enough to look." James staggered forward, his hand raised, his fury unchecked. "You're lying! You've hidden it from us. Tell me where it is, or I'll—" But before his hand could fall, the house itself seemed to intervene. A great crack split through the ceiling, dust raining down, the storm outside surging anew, with a roar of thunder so violent it shook the windows. The children froze, terror flashing in their eyes. I lifted my cane, pointing it at them, my voice rising above the storm. "You may break this house, you may break me, but you will never break the truth. The will lives, and it will find its rightful hands. And when it does, you will know the cost of your greed." The storm howled, the lights flickered, and the children stumbled back, fear finally piercing their greed. And I sat once more in my chair, my heart steady, my spirit unbroken. The game was nearly over. The final act was close. So, my dear listener, do not turn away now. If you followed me this far, If your breath is quick and your heart heavy, then stay. Like, share, subscribe, for the end is near, and the secret you've waited for is about to change everything. The storm raged on, but inside the house the silence was heavier than thunder. James stood trembling, his fists clenched, his face red with rage, the veins in his neck straining like ropes ready to snap. Thomas leaned against the wall, his usual grin gone, replaced by a cold mask of defeat. Margaret sobbed quietly, her fragile frame shaking, as though her sorrow would consume her whole. And I, old as I was, frail as I looked, sat in my chair by the fire with more strength than any of them, because I knew what they did not. I knew that in their frenzy, in their greed, they had already lost. "You think me cruel," I said softly, my voice carrying through the tense air. "You think me wicked for keeping the truth from you. But tell me, my children, look at yourselves. What have you become? Do you even recognize the faces that stare back at you in the mirror? Violence, lies, betrayal. This is what greed has made of you." James sneered, his voice hoarse with fury. "Spare us your lectures. Tell us where it is. Now." I leaned forward, my eyes piercing his. "And if I told you, James, what would you do? Would you share with your sister, with your brother, or would you tear it from their hands and keep it all for yourself?" His silence was my answer. I turned to Thomas. "And you, my cunning boy, you think yourself clever, untouchable. But cleverness without compassion is nothing but cruelty. You would twist the will into a weapon, wouldn't you? Use it to control, to dominate, to claim what was never meant for you." His lips curled, but his eyes betrayed the truth. Finally, I looked at Margaret, sweet, broken Margaret. "And you, my girl, you weep because you know the truth. You know that this house, this legacy, was never about wealth or land or power. It was about love, about family, about protecting one another. Do you remember love, Margaret? Do you?" Her sobs deepened, her face buried in her hands. I sighed, leaning back, the weight of years pressing down on me. "You burned the will, thinking you destroyed my wishes. You searched this house, thinking you could unearth the truth. But you never understood. A piece of paper is only ink and parchment. It can burn, it can vanish. But my words, my intent, my justice, those cannot be destroyed. That is why I made a copy not hidden in this house, not buried in stone or wood, but placed in hands far stronger than mine." James snarled, stepping closer, looming over me. "Oh, whose hands?" he demanded. I smiled faintly. "The hands of a man you all scorned. The hands of your father's oldest friend, the solicitor who watched you grow and saw the poison in your hearts before even I did. The copy rests with him, sealed and sworn, and when the time comes, when I draw my last breath, he will reveal it, and none of you will be able to stop it." The color drained from their faces. Thomas staggered, his hand gripping the back of a chair for support. Margaret gasped, covering her mouth. James let out a roar of fury, so violent it shook the room, his fists slamming into the mantel, sending shards of wood splintering. "You tricked us," he bellowed. "All of this for nothing." "No," I said firmly, my voice stronger than it had been in years. "Not for nothing, for justice, for protection, for love of what is right. You tried to burn my will, but you cannot burn truth. You cannot burn the justice that waits for you." They were silent then, the storm outside, echoing the storm within. Margaret sank to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. Thomas's eyes flickered with something I could not name. Fear, perhaps, or regret. But James was lost. His rage consumed him like fire devours dry wood. He lunged toward me, his hand raised. But before he could strike, the house itself seemed to intervene one final time. A deafening crack tore through the walls, the storm breaking with a ferocity that sent glass shattering from the windows. The wind roared through the room, extinguishing every candle, rattling every beam. James stumbled back, his fury halted by something greater than himself. And I, though frail, though old, stood tall in the storm's fury, my cane planted firmly against the wooden floor. "This house protects me," I cried. "It protects the truth, and it will never bow to you." For the first time, my children looked small. James, with all his violence, looked like a boy throwing a tantrum. Thomas, with all his schemes, looked like a man undone. Margaret, with all her tears, looked like a child lost in the dark. And I pitied them. Pity so deep it ached. The storm began to ease, the winds calming, the rain softening to a whisper. The silence that followed was different this time, heavier but calmer. Final. I lowered myself back into my chair, my bones weary, my soul steady. "Leave this house," I said quietly. "It is no longer yours. It never was. When the time comes, you will see the will. You will see where my love truly lies. And then perhaps you will understand what you have lost." They did not speak. Not James, not Thomas, not even Margaret. They simply turned, broken, defeated, and drifted from the room like shadows retreating before dawn, and I was left alone once more. The fire flickering, the storm fading, the house sighing with relief. I closed my eyes, resting my hand on the arm of my chair. The will was safe, my legacy was safe, my truth was safe, and though my heart was heavy with sorrow for the children I had lost to greed, I knew, when the day came, justice would rise like the sun, and nothing could stop it. So here I sit, my dear listener, my story nearly at its end. You have walked with me through storms and secrets, through betrayal and fear. You have heard my heart break, my rage burn, my truth endure. And now, you know the final secret, that the copy of my will rise to change everything. So don't forget me. Don't forget my voice. Like, share, and subscribe. Because stories like mine, stories of truth, betrayal, and justice, must be told. And when my breath is gone, my words will live on, just as my will shall live on, unburned, unbroken, and undefeated. The fire crackles, the house settles, and the storm fades into memory. But the will remains.